My fiancée texted, "I canceled your therapy. You don't need it. You need to man up." I had PTSD from military service. I replied, "Therapy saves lives." Then I called my therapist, apologized, rescheduled, and ended the engagement during that very session. Well, my therapist said, "That was the healthiest decision I've seen you make." I, 32 male, served 6 years in the Army. 2 deployments. Infantry. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what I saw because that's between me and my therapist and the ceiling I stare at some nights when sleep decides to take the evening off. What I will say is that I came home different from who I left. Everyone does. Some guys hide it better. I wasn't one of them. I got out at 26 and spent about a year being a complete disaster. Drinking too much. Couldn't hold a schedule. Startled at everything. Car backfires, fireworks on the 4th of July, someone dropping a pan in the kitchen. Classic stuff. The VA diagnosed me with PTSD, which wasn't exactly a plot twist, and got me connected with a therapist through their mental health program. That therapist changed my life. I'm not being dramatic. I mean it literally. I was in a dark place. Not actively dangerous, but the kind of dark where you stop seeing the point of things. And this man pulled me back inch by inch over 2 years. We did cognitive processing therapy, EMDR, the whole toolkit. Slow, painful, unglamorous work. No montages. Just sitting in a beige office twice a month talking about things I'd rather forget until they stopped controlling me. By the time I met my fiancée, I was in a stable place. Working full-time as a warehouse supervisor for a logistics company. Making $52,000 a year. On a truck. Had a routine. Still seeing my therapist twice a month because maintenance matters. You don't stop taking insulin just because your blood sugar's normal. We met through a mutual friend at a barbecue. She was funny, direct, easy to be around. She worked as a dental hygienist. Solid job, good benefits. We clicked fast. Started dating. Moved in together after about 10 months. I proposed at 14 months. Maybe too fast. My therapist actually flagged that. But I was in love and feeling stable for the first time in years, and I thought, this is it. I was upfront about the PTSD from the start. Third date, actually, I told her I was a veteran, that I had PTSD, and that I was in ongoing therapy. I told her what it looked like on bad days. Insomnia, occasional nightmares, sensitivity to loud noises, sometimes needing to leave crowded places. I told her this wasn't going away and that managing it was a permanent part of my life. She said, "I think it's brave that you're getting help." That sentence made me fall for her. I wish it hadn't. For the first year, she was supportive, or at least she performed support well. She'd ask how my sessions went. She'd give me space on bad nights. When I had a rough episode after a car accident on the highway triggered a flashback, nobody was hurt. Just a fender bender, but the sound of impact put me somewhere else for about 30 seconds. She held my hand in the parking lot and didn't ask questions. I thought, this woman gets it. Then we got engaged and something shifted. It started small. She'd make comments about the therapy schedule. Again, didn't you just go? My sessions were every other Tuesday. They've been every other Tuesday for 3 years. Nothing had changed, but suddenly it was an inconvenience. It became about money. Each session through the VA was covered, but I paid a $15 copay. $30 a month. She said we should redirect that money toward wedding planning. $30 a month. Toward a wedding. I said no. Then the comments got more pointed. She started saying things like, "Other veterans move on. Why can't you?" And "My uncle served and he doesn't go to therapy." Cool. Her uncle did 2 years in the reserves and never deployed. Not exactly the same resume. About 3 months before the wedding, the mask came fully off. We were at her parents' house for Sunday dinner. Her dad asked me how I was doing. Genuine guy, I always liked him. I mentioned I'd had a good therapy session that week. Casual. No details. Just a positive comment. My fiancée, from across the table, said, "He's still doing the therapy thing. I keep telling him he doesn't need it anymore." The table went quiet. Her dad looked at her. Her mom looked at her plate. Her brother, who I actually got along with really well, stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Her dad said, "Therapy is important. Let the man take care of himself." She rolled her eyes at her own father defending mental health care for a combat veteran. I stared at my mashed potatoes and said nothing. I should have said something. I know that now. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, I was getting dressed for work. My therapy appointment was scheduled for 4:30 p.m. I'd arranged with my supervisor to leave 30 minutes early, same as I'd been doing for years. My phone buzzed. Text from my fiancée. Hey, so I called your therapist's office and canceled your appointment today. You don't need it. You need to man up. Let's use that time to go look at table settings for the reception. Love you. I read it 3 times. She called the VA mental health clinic, identified herself as my fiancé, and canceled my appointment. Now, important detail, she wasn't able to access my actual records because of HIPAA, but the front desk scheduling system allowed cancellations from anyone who called with the patient's name and date of birth. It's a flaw in the system, and yeah, I've since flagged it. But at that moment, my appointment was canceled and she was talking about table settings. I sat on the edge of the bed for about 5 minutes. Not angry yet, just still. That military stillness where your brain goes quiet and starts processing tactically instead of emotionally. Then I texted back, "Therapy saves lives." She sent a laughing emoji, an actual laughing emoji. I picked up the phone and called my therapist's office directly. Got the receptionist. Apologized for the confusion. Explained that the cancellation was unauthorized. She was understanding. Said it happened more often than you'd think, which is both reassuring and deeply sad. Rescheduled for the same day, 5 p.m. slot that had just opened. I went to work. Got through the day. Drove to my appointment. And in that session, sitting in the beige chair I'd been sitting in for 3 years, I told my therapist everything. The comments, the escalation, the cancellation, the man up text, the laughing emoji. My therapist listened. He does this thing where he doesn't react immediately, just absorbs, processes, then responds. When I finished, he asked me one question. "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to end the engagement." He nodded. Then he said, and this is verbatim because I'll never forget it, "That might be the healthiest decision I've seen you make in 3 years." I drove home, walked into the apartment, and told her we were done. Update 1. The fallout 10 days later. So, telling your fiancé the engagement is off while she's comparing napkin swatches is an experience I wouldn't recommend, but I also wouldn't take back. She was sitting at the dining table with her laptop open, wedding Pinterest boards everywhere, and I walked in and said, "We need to talk." She said, "If this is about the therapy thing, I already said I was sorry." She had not said she was sorry. Not once. Not in any form. I pointed this out. She said, "I meant to. Anyway, it's not a big deal. I was trying to help. You canceled a PTSD therapy appointment for a combat veteran so we could look at table settings. Because you need to start prioritizing US over your past. The wedding is in 3 months. There's not going to be a wedding." She stared at me. Then she laughed. Not a real laugh. That defensive, dismissive laugh people do when they think you're bluffing. "Okay, drama king. Sit down. I'm not being dramatic. I've thought about this. I talked to my therapist. This is done." The laughter stopped. Her face changed. And then the tears started. Immediately. Like a switch. Full sobbing, mascara running, the works. "You can't do this to me. We sent invitations. My mom already bought her dress. We have deposits." I told her I understood there would be financial consequences, and I was willing to eat my share of the losses. I wasn't going to leave her holding the bag on deposits. That's not who I am. But the relationship was over. She grabbed my arm. "You're throwing away our future because of one text." It wasn't one text. It was one text that showed me exactly what you think of me. "I think you're strong. That's why I said man up, because you are a man and you don't need a therapist to tell you that. I need a therapist because I watch people die and it broke something in my brain. That's not weakness. And anyone who thinks it is doesn't get to marry me." She cried for another hour. I sat with her because despite everything, I'm not going to just walk away while someone's falling apart. But I didn't budge. And eventually she packed a bag and went to her mom's house. The next morning, her mother called me. Now, her mom is a piece of work. I'd been polite to her for 2 years, but she'd always treated me like I was slightly beneath her daughter. Little comments about my blue-collar job. questions about whether I'd thought about going back to school. Once she asked me, at Thanksgiving, if my PTSD ever made me violent toward women. In front of 7 people. I said no. Her dad apologized to me later in private. Good man. Wrong wife. Her mom called and opened with, I always knew you weren't ready for commitment. Men with your issues shouldn't be making promises they can't keep. I said, ma'am, your daughter canceled a medical appointment without my consent. We're not negotiating. It's not a medical appointment. It's talking. You sit in a chair and talk. That's not medicine. I'm going to hang up now. If you do this, you'll owe us. We've spent thousands. Send me an itemized list of what you've personally paid for, and I'll reimburse my fair share. I'm not paying for your daughter's decisions. She hung up on me. I was fine with that. Over the next week, the entitlement machine kicked into high gear. My fiancé, ex-fiancé, came back to the apartment to talk 3 times. Each time, the narrative shifted. First visit, she was sorry, still no actual apology for the specific thing she did. Second visit, I was overreacting and all couples have disagreements about boundaries. Third visit, she brought her best friend for backup. The best friend sat on my couch and actually said, you know she gave up a lot to be with you, right? She could have dated someone without all the baggage. I said, you're welcome to leave my apartment. She said, see, this is what she's talking about. The aggression. I asked you to leave my own home. That's not aggression. That's a boundary. My ex stood there and said nothing. Didn't correct her friend. Didn't say, hey, maybe don't call his PTSD baggage. Just stood there. They left. I changed the locks the next day. Our lease was in my name. She'd been added as an occupant, not a co-lessee. My landlord confirmed in writing that I had the right to change locks with proper notice to an occupant I was asking to vacate. I gave her 14 days written notice, sent via text and certified mail, to collect her remaining belongings. Then the wedding cancellation. This was the expensive part. Venue deposit, $3,500, non-refundable. We'd split it 50-50, so I was out $1,750. Caterer, $2,200 deposit, also non-refundable. My share, $1,100. Photographer, $600 deposit. My share, $300. DJ had a cancellation clause. We got that back entirely. Her dress was non-refundable, but that was her purchase. The invitations had already been sent, about 120 of them. So there was the humiliation factor of contacting everyone. I sent a simple message to everyone on my side. The wedding has been called off. I appreciate your support and understanding. Didn't explain. Didn't bash her. Just the facts. She told people I had a mental breakdown and couldn't handle the pressure of commitment. She told her family I was unstable. She told our mutual friends I'd been getting worse, and she'd been walking on eggshells. That's the one that got me. Walking on eggshells. She took the language of living with someone who has PTSD, real, painful, legitimate language, and weaponized it to make herself the victim. Total financial damage to me from the canceled wedding. About $3,150 in lost deposits, plus another $400 in random stuff. Postage for the invitations, a non-refundable tux rental deposit, a couple of small things. Call it $3,600. Not devastating, but not nothing for a guy making $52,000. Update 2. The escalation and the VA, 3 weeks later. This is the update I didn't want to write, but here we go. After the breakup went public, my ex launched a campaign. Not on social media. She was smarter than that. She went person to person. Old school whisper network. She told my ex-fiancé's version of events to every mutual friend, every distant acquaintance, every person who'd RSVP'd to the wedding. In her version, I was a ticking time bomb who refused to get better and snapped when she tried to lovingly redirect my treatment. She actually used the word redirect, like my PTSD therapy was a misbehaving GPS. But here's where she really crossed the line. She contacted my employer, not formally. She didn't call HR. She called the front office of the warehouse and asked to speak with my direct supervisor. When a receptionist asked what it was regarding, she said, and I know this because the receptionist told me later I'm concerned about a safety issue with one of your employees. A safety issue? She was going to tell my boss that I was mentally unstable. At a warehouse where I supervise a team of 12 people operating forklifts and heavy machinery. If that seed got planted, that I was an unsafe person to have in a supervisory role around equipment, that's not just embarrassing. That's career-ending. The receptionist, bless her, didn't transfer the call. She took a message and brought it to me first. She said, "Some woman called about a safety concern about you. Didn't leave a name, but the caller ID showed your ex's number. Thought you should know." I went straight to HR. I didn't wait. Didn't try to handle it quietly. I walked into the HR manager's office and laid it all out. The breakup, the therapy cancellation, the harassment, and now the call to my workplace. I told them my ex was attempting to sabotage my employment, and I wanted it on record. The HR manager was a veteran herself, Navy, 8 years. She listened to the whole thing with this expression that was half sympathy, half barely contained fury. She said, "We don't take anonymous tips about employee mental health from unidentified callers. And frankly, any further calls from this number will be documented as harassment." She flagged the number in their system. She also said, and this was above and beyond, "Your therapy is your business and your service record is something to be proud of. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I almost lost it in her office. Didn't, but almost. Now, I could have let it go there. The call didn't reach my supervisor. No damage was done. I could have moved on, but she tried to take my job. The thing that kept my lights on, my truck running, my co-pays paid. She tried to dismantle my livelihood using my mental health as a weapon. And I wasn't going to pretend that didn't happen. I called my therapist, not for an emergency session, for advice. I told him what happened. He said something I didn't expect. He told me the VA had a patient advocacy office that handled situations where a veteran's mental health treatment was being interfered with by outside parties. He said what she'd done, canceling my appointment, and now attempting to use my treatment status against me professionally, might fall under a pattern that the advocacy office would want to know about. I called the VA patient advocate the next day. They were incredibly responsive. The advocate I spoke with took a detailed report and said that unauthorized cancellation of a veteran's mental health appointment was something they documented for systemic tracking purposes. They also updated my file so that no future appointments could be canceled by anyone but me, with a verbal password I'd set up. That should have been the default, but now it was ironclad. But here's what really mattered. The advocate connected me with a veteran's legal aid attorney. Pro bono. Because what my ex did, the repeated harassment, the workplace contact, the interference with medical care, could constitute a pattern of harassment under our state civil code. The attorney reviewed everything. The text canceling my appointment, the man up message, the workplace call documented by HR with the phone number, the text from her and her mother, the best friend's visit where she called my PTSD baggage in my own home. All of it. He sent her a cease and desist letter. Not a vague, template one. A detailed, itemized letter that outlined every documented instance of interference and harassment, cited the relevant state statutes, and made it clear that any further contact with me, my employer, my healthcare providers, or my family would result in a petition for a protective order. Her mother called me 40 minutes after the letter was delivered. I know because she called from a number I didn't recognize. She'd gotten a new phone or borrowed someone's. I picked up without thinking. You're really going to threaten her with legal action? Over what? A canceled appointment? You people are so dramatic. You go overseas, come back broken, and expect the whole world to. I hung up, screenshotted the call log, sent it to the attorney with a note. Contact from her mother 40 minutes after C&D was delivered. The attorney sent a second letter. This one to her mother personally. Same terms, same statutes. Same warning. The call stopped, but she had one more card to play. She went to my buddy, my best friend from the service, the guy who'd been my groomsman, and tried to turn him. She met him for coffee under the pretense of checking in and spent 45 minutes trying to convince him that I was spiraling and needed real help, not just some VA therapist. My buddy, who'd been in the same unit as me, who'd been through his own stuff, who'd been the one to drive me to my first therapy appointment 3 years ago, listened to the whole thing. Then he said, You canceled his therapy and called it manning up. You called his job and tried to get him flagged as dangerous. And now you're sitting here telling me he needs help? Lady, the only thing he needs help with is getting away from you. And it looks like he's handled that just fine. He got up, left, and called me from the parking lot. Dude, your ex just tried to recruit me for Team Crazy. I declined. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Real, actual, from the gut laughter. Update 3, where it all landed 5 weeks later. Final update. Gonna keep this as clean as I can. The cease and desist worked. My ex and her mother stopped contacting me entirely. No calls, no texts, no drive-bys, no intermediaries. The attorney said that most of the time, a well-drafted C&D is enough. People realize that the next step is a courtroom, and suddenly their righteous anger develops a healthy respect for consequences. She did make one final attempt to get at me, though, and it was the most pathetic one. She mailed me a letter. Physical mail. Handwritten. 3 pages. I'll summarize. She was sorry, still not for the specific things she did. Just generally sorry it came to this. She said I'd thrown away something beautiful. She said she'd been stressed about the wedding and acted out of love. She said my therapist had poisoned me against her, and that no healthy person chooses a stranger in an office over their partner. She called my therapist a licensed clinical psychologist who'd spent 3 years pulling me back from the edge, a stranger in an office. The last paragraph was the kicker. She said that if I changed my mind, she'd consider taking me back. But I need to switch to a female therapist because she was uncomfortable with me sharing intimate details with another man. She wanted to control my PTSD treatment, even in the breakup letter. The absolute audacity was almost artistic. I didn't respond. I put the letter in the folder with all the other documentation and moved on. The financial aftermath, all in between the canceled wedding deposits, the attorney consultation that exceeded the pro bono scope for $150 for additional filings, and the cost of changing locks and breaking a gym membership we'd shared, $85 early termination fee. I was at about $4,100. Manageable but tight. I picked up overtime for 2 months and ate a lot of rice and chicken. The social fallout. I lost about 4 friends. Not close ones, peripheral people who heard her version first and decided I was the villain. 2 of them reached out months later after hearing the full story. I didn't reconnect. Not out of spite. I just didn't have the bandwidth. The people who stayed were the ones who mattered. My buddy from the service. A couple guys from work. My sister, who called me every other day for a month straight and never once said, "I told you so," even though she'd had reservations about my ex from day one. Her dad reached out once. About 2 weeks after the C&D. He called me. I picked up because I'd always respected him. He said, "I heard what happened. All of it. I don't agree with what she did, and I'm sorry it went this far." I said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." He said, "For what it's worth, I told her mother to stop calling you. She didn't listen. I'm glad the attorney's letter did what I couldn't." That conversation lasted about 3 minutes. Firm handshake energy over the phone. I won't hear from him again, and that's okay. He said what he needed to say. Now here's where things stand. Therapy is going well. Better than well, actually. My therapist and I spent several sessions processing the relationship itself. Not just the breakup, but the pattern. How I'd ignored warning signs because the good parts felt so good. How I'd rationalized her comments about therapy as coming from a place of love when they were actually coming from a place of contempt. How I'd been so grateful that someone accepted my PTSD that I didn't notice she was actually trying to erase it. That last one hit hard. I spent so long being thankful someone would date a guy with issues that I didn't demand basic respect. My therapist called it a gratitude trap, where you're so relieved someone tolerates your worst that you let them disrespect your best. Working on that. Probably will be for a while. I got a raise at work. Not massive, $3,800 a year. But my supervisor put me up for it based on performance reviews that were done before any of the personal stuff happened. Good timing. I used part of it to build my savings back up after the wedding losses. The VA advocacy office followed up with me about a month after my initial report. They said my case had been flagged as part of a broader review of their appointment cancellation protocols. Apparently, my situation wasn't unique, There have been multiple cases of family members or partners canceling veterans' mental health appointments without authorization. They're implementing a system-wide change that will require verbal confirmation from the patient for any cancellation. It won't be instant. Bureaucracy moves slow, but it's happening. My story, in some small way, is going to protect other veterans from what happened to me. I didn't plan that. I just reported what happened. But knowing that some other guy who's 2 years in EMDR won't have his appointment canceled by a partner who thinks he should man up, that matters to me more than I can explain. Last thing, and this is the part one keep coming back to. About a week ago, I was sitting in my therapist's office. Same beige chair. Same bookshelf with the plant that I'm pretty sure is fake, but I've never asked. We were wrapping up a session, and I said, "I'm doing okay." He looked at me over his glasses and said, "You are. You really are." And then he said, "You know what I remember most about the day you ended the engagement?" "What?" "You didn't ask me if it was the right decision. You told me it was. That was the first time in 3 years you trusted yourself that completely." I sat with that for a minute. He's right. For a long time, I didn't trust my own judgment. Not because of the PTSD, but because the PTSD made me doubt everything, including my ability to know what was good for me. And that day in that chair, I knew. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I'd finally learned to protect myself the same way I'd protect anyone else I cared about. That's the thing nobody tells you about therapy. It doesn't just teach you to cope. It teaches you that you're worth coping for. I'm single. I'm 32. I live alone in an apartment that's too quiet sometimes. I still have bad nights. I still flinch at loud sounds. I still can't watch certain movies. But every other Tuesday at 4:30 p.m., I sit in that beige chair and I do the work. And nobody is taking that from me again.
On the love thing, one of the interesting things about love is you can try to remember the feeling of being loved. So go back to when someone was in love with you or someone did love you, and like really remember that feeling, like really sit with it and try to recreate it within yourself. And then go to the feeling of you loving someone and when you were in love. And I'm not even talking about romantic love necessarily, so be a little careful there. I'm talking more about like love for
It can sometimes get complex if you're talking about past romantic love.
Right, a sibling or a child or something like that, or a parent. And think about when you felt love towards someone or something. And now, which is better? And I would argue that the feeling of being in love is actually more exhilarating than the feeling of being loved. Being loved is a little cloying. It's a little too sweet. You kind of want to push the person away. It's a little embarrassing. And you know that if that person is too much into it, that you feel constrained. On the other hand, the feeling of being in love is very expansive. It's very open. It actually makes you a better version of yourself. It makes you want to be a better person. And so you can create love anytime you want. It's just that craving to receive it. That's the problem.
The most expensive trait is pride. How come?
Oh, that was a recent one. I tweeted that just because I think that pride is the enemy of learning. So when I look at my friends and colleagues, the ones who are still stuck in the past and have grown the least are the ones who were the proudest, because they sort of feel like they already had the answers, and so they don't want to correct themselves publicly. And so this goes back to the fame conversation. You get locked into something you said, it made you famous, you're known for that, and now you want to pivot or change. So pride prevents you from saying, I'm wrong.
What's pride in this context here?
It could be as simple as you're trading stocks and then you don't admit you were wrong, so you hang on to a lousy trade. It could be that you made a decision to marry someone or move somewhere or enter a profession. It doesn't work out, and then you don't admit that you were wrong, so you get stuck in it. It's mostly about getting trapped in local maxima as opposed to going back down and climbing up the mountain again.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's an expensive trait, because you continue to need to repay it in one form or another.
Yeah, you're just stuck at a suboptimal point. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you success.
And time.
The great artists always have this ability to start over, whether it's Paul Simon or Madonna or U2, and I'm dating myself a little bit. But even the great entrepreneurs, they're just always willing to start over. I'm always struck by the Elon Musk story where, he he did PayPal as X.com originally. Actually, it was his financial institution that got merged into PayPal.
Well, it's good that you've got the domain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll park that. I'll hold on to
He's
it.
consistent. He's been using it for quite a while. And he said something like along the lines of, I made $200 million from the sale of PayPal. I put $100 million into SpaceX, 80 million into Tesla, 20 into Solar City, and I had to borrow money for rent. Right? This guy is a perennial risk taker. He's always willing to start over. He doesn't have any pride about being seen as successful or being seen as a failure. He's willing to put it all on the line.
Back himself again each time.
Back himself again each time. But the key thing is he's always willing to start over. Right. Even now, when he's sort of made his new startup as a USA, right? He's basically trying to fix it like he would fix one of his startups. And I think that is a willingness to look like a fool, and that is a willingness to start over. And a lot of people just don't have that. They become successful, or they become rich, or they become famous, and that's it. They're stuck. They don't want to go back to zero. And creating anything great requires 0 to 1. And that means you go back to zero. And that's really painful and hard to do.
Talking about risk, something I've been thinking about a lot to do with you. Any moment when you're not having a good time, when you're not really happy, you're not doing anyone any favors. I think lots of people have become unusually familiar with suffering silently in that sort of a way, and not having a high bar for your expectation for quality of life.
Yeah, a lot of it is just you're memeing yourself into a bad outcome because you think that somehow suffering is glorious, or that it makes you a better person. Or, my old quip was, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? Why can't you figure that one out? The reality is you can be smart and happy. There are plenty of people in human history who are smart and happy. And I think it just starts with saying, yeah, you know what? I'm going to be happy.